Aduni had convinced her wealthy classmates that her father owned 3 companies. The truth? He was a night security guard who couldn't even afford new shoes. Now, her web of lies was about to unravel in the most devastating way possible. In the bustling heart of Lagos, where gleaming skyscrapers cast shadows over crowded slums, lived a 16-year-old girl named Aduni Okafor. Her world was divided into 2 parts: the cramped one-room apartment in Ajegule, where she shared space with her parents and the sounds of 20 other families, and the prestigious Premier International School in Victoria Island, where she had earned a full scholarship through sheer brilliance. Aduni was the pride of her community, the first person in 3 generations to attend secondary school, let alone one of Lagos's most elite institutions. Her father, Kehinde Okafor, worked double shifts as a night security guard, his weathered hands counting naira notes by candlelight to make sure there was always transport money for her daughter's education. Her mother, Folake, worked before dawn to prepare zobo and roasted plantain, which she sold by the roadside, her purple-stained fingers a testament to her determination to support their family's dreams. The scholarship was a miracle, but it came with a price Aduni hadn't anticipated. At Premier International, her classmates arrived in air-conditioned cars driven by uniformed chauffeurs. They spoke casually about family vacations to Dubai and London, about parents who owned businesses and live in mansions with swimming pools. Their designer uniforms looked crisp and new, while Aduni's, carefully washed and ironed each night, had been bought second-hand from Katangwa Market. Every morning, Aduni would take 2 Danfo buses and walk the final kilometer to school, timing her arrival carefully to avoid being seen by classmates. Every evening, she would return to Ajegule to the smell of kerosene stoves and the sound of generators humming through the night, carrying textbooks that cost more than her family's weekly food budget. She was brilliant, top of her class in every subject, but brilliance couldn't bridge the gap between her world and theirs. And in her desperate desire to belong, to be accepted, to not be pitied as the scholarship girl, Aduni was about to make a choice that would change everything.
Aduni's hands trembled as she clutched her acceptance letter to Premier International School. The paper felt heavy in her sweaty palms, heavier than the burden she was about to carry for the next 3 years. "My father owns 3 companies," she heard herself saying on her first day, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The smell of expensive perfume from her new classmates filled her nostrils, making her stomach churn with nervous energy. Their designer uniforms looked crisp and perfect, while hers, bought second-hand from Katangwa Market, felt rough against her skin. Chioma, the class queen, with her glossy straightened hair and gold jewelry, raised an eyebrow. "Really? Which companies?" Aduni's heart hammered against her ribcage. The sound of her father's worn slippers shuffling across their tiny one-room apartment echoed in her mind. She could still taste the garri and groundnuts they'd shared for breakfast, their usual meal when money was tight. Import and export, she lied smoothly, surprised by how easily the words came. And real estate. The lie felt like swallowing broken glass. But the way Chioma's friends suddenly looked at her with new interest made it seem worth it. For the first time in her life, Aduni wasn't the scholarship girl, the poor one, the outsider looking in. "That's so cool," squealed Kemi, whose father actually owned a chain of hotels. "You should totally hang out with us at the mall this weekend." As the school bell rang and students filed into their air-conditioned classroom, Aduni felt a mix of excitement and terror coursing through her veins. She had opened a door she wasn't sure she could close. What she didn't know was that this single lie would soon grow into a monster that would consume every aspect of her life, threatening to destroy not just her friendships, but her very sense of who she was.
3 months into the term, Aduni had become a master actress. she had crafted an entire fictional family, a businessman father who traveled frequently, explaining why he never picked her up, a mother who ran a boutique in Victoria Island, justifying her absence at school events, and a driver named Samuel, who supposedly dropped her off every morning. The truth was much harsher. Every morning, at 5 a.m., she woke up on a thin mattress in their one-room apartment in Ajegunle. The walls were so thin, she could hear her neighbor's baby crying, the sound mixing with the call to prayer from the nearby mosque. Her father, Baba Adoni, would already be gone, off to his job as a security guard at a bank, working double shifts to afford her school fees. "Adoni, hurry up," her mother would whisper, careful not to wake the 3 families they shared the compound with. Mama sold zobo and roasted plantain by the roadside, her hands permanently stained purple from the hibiscus leaves. The journey to school was a daily humiliation Adoni had to hide. 2 downful buses, a long walk, and careful timing to ensure no classmate ever saw her arriving on foot. She would duck behind cars, her heart racing every time she spotted a familiar face. At school, she lived in constant fear. When friends talked about their weekend trips to Dubai, she would nod along, claiming her family preferred quiet vacations in Europe. When they complained about their drivers being late, she sympathized, saying Samuel had the same problem. The stress was eating her alive. Dark circles formed under her eyes from nights spent awake rehearsing stories about her fake life. Her appetite disappeared, and her mother noticed how thin she was getting. "Adoni, are you sick?" Mama asked one evening, touching her forehead with calloused hands that smelled of palm oil and hard work. "I'm fine, Mama," she lied, adding another deception to her growing collection. But deep down, she knew she was drowning in her own web of lies, and she had no idea how to swim back to the surface. If you are enjoying this story of how lies can trap us and want to hear more Nigerian folktales that touch your heart, please hit that subscribe button below. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My parents are hosting a graduation party for my sister next Saturday, Chioma announced during lunch break, and manicured nails clicking against her phone screen. Everyone's invited. It's going to be at our house in Banana Island. Aduni's spoon froze halfway to her mouth, the jollof rice suddenly tasting like sand. Her stomach twisted into knots as the reality hit her like a slap. "That sounds amazing," she managed to croak out, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Your parents can come too," Kemi added excitedly. "My mom specifically asked about meeting your family. She's curious about your dad's import business." The world seemed to spin around Aduni. She could hear her own heartbeats thundering in her ears, drowning out the chatter of her classmates. How could she possibly bring Baba, with his rough hands and simple way of speaking, to a party full of Lagos elite? How could she introduce Mama, who had never owned a dress that wasn't second-hand? "Oh, they are traveling that weekend," she heard herself say, the lie bitter on her tongue. But even as she spoke, she saw the disappointment flicker across her friends' faces. These lies that had once opened doors were now becoming prison bars, trapping her in a cage of her own making. That evening, she sat on the concrete floor of their compound, watching Mama count the day's earnings by the light of a kerosene lantern. 2,300 naira. Barely enough for transport and food for the next day. "How was school today, my daughter?" Mama asked, her voice tired but warm. Aduni wanted to tell her everything, about the party, about the lies, and about how she was slowly losing herself in this pretense. But looking at her mother's hopeful face, at the pride that shone in her eyes whenever she talked about her daughter attending the prestigious school, she couldn't bring herself to shatter that dream. "It was fine, Mama," she whispered, adding another brick to the wall that was separating her from everyone she loved. That evening, as she lay on her thin mattress listening to the rain drumming on their zinc roof, Aduni made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't keep running from the truth forever. But what she didn't know was that fate was about to force her hand in the cruelest way possible. Family Heritage Project. Each student would present their family history and invite parents for a cultural showcase. Miss Johnson's words felt like a death sentence. Adoni stared at the project sheet, the letters blurring through her tears. Around her, classmates chatted excitedly about their presentations. "This will be so easy," Choma laughed. My grandmother's family started the first textile business in Kano. My great-grandfather was a chief in Benin. I have his coral beads and everything. Adoni's throat felt like sandpaper. What could she say? That her grandfather was a farmer who never learned to read? That her family's greatest treasure was Mama's old sewing machine that barely worked? 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to figure out how to present her real family or create an even bigger lie. At home that night, she found Baba mending his only good shirt by candlelight. Their electricity had been cut off again. Baba, she started carefully, tell me about our family. His weathered face lit up with surprise. Ah, Adoni, you want to know about your people? For the next hour, he told her stories she had never heard. About her great-grandmother who was known for her kindness, who fed every hungry child in their village. About her grandfather who walked 20 miles to sell palm wine, using the money to send Baba to primary school. About ancestors who may not have owned companies, but who owned something more valuable, integrity. We may not have much money, my daughter, but we have something that cannot be bought. We have each other and we have our good name. His words hit her like a physical blow. While she had been ashamed of this man, he had been working multiple jobs to give her opportunities he never had. While she had been creating fictional parents, her real parents were sacrificing everything for her dreams. That night, Adoni made a decision that terrified her more than any lie she had ever told. She was going to tell the truth. But as she drifted off to sleep, she had no idea that her biggest test was still coming. Presentation day arrived like a storm. Adoni's hand shook as she watched her classmates present their family histories with confidence and pride. Chioma's parents sat in the front row, dressed in expensive traditional attire, beaming as their daughter spoke about their family's business empire. When it was Adoni's turn, her legs felt like jelly as she walked to the front of the class. She had stayed up all night practicing what she would say, but now, facing her classmates and their parents, all her courage seemed to evaporate. I want to tell you about my family, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Even Miss Johnson leaned forward, curious to finally meet the parents of her star student. My father, Adoni's voice cracked. She closed her eyes and suddenly she could smell Baba's aftershave, the cheap one he saved for special occasions. She could see Mama's hands, rough from years of hard work, but gentle when they touched her face. My father is a security guard. He works night shifts at a bank to pay for my education. My mother sells zobo by the roadside. We live in one room in Ajegule. Gasps echoed through the classroom. Chioma's mouth fell open. Some parents whispered among themselves, but Adoni continued, tears streaming down her face. I lied about everything because I was ashamed, but I realize now that shame belongs to me, not to them. My parents may not own companies, but they own something more valuable. They own love, sacrifice, and integrity. She pulled out a worn photograph. This is my family. This is who I really am. The silence that followed felt eternal. Adoni prepared herself for laughter, for rejection, for the collapse of everything she had built. But what happened next would change her life forever. Miss Johnson was the first to stand up and clap. Slowly, one by one, other parents joined her. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. That was the most honest thing I've heard all day, said Mrs. Adoniro, Kemi's mother. It takes real courage to tell the truth when lies would be easier. To Adoni's shock, Kemi stood up, tears in her, proud of you. Later that day, something beautiful happened. Chioma approached Adoni with genuine curiosity in her eyes. Can you teach me how to make zobo? She asked. It sounds more interesting than shopping for the 100th time. Over the following months, Adoni discovered that her real story was far more compelling than any lie she could have created. Her friends were fascinated by her mother's business, and some even helped her expand it. Baba's wisdom and gentle humor made him a favorite among parents at school events. Most importantly, Adoni learned that authenticity was not just more honest, it was more powerful. When she started a tutoring program for students from less privileged backgrounds, using her own scholarship experience as a foundation, she found her true purpose. The moral. In a world that often values appearance over substance, it takes courage to be authentic. But when we stop trying to be who we think others want us to be and start being who we really are, we discover that our truth is more beautiful than any lie we could ever tell. Your background does not determine your destiny, but your character does. The greatest wealth is not in what you own, but in who you are and who loves you for exactly that. Remember, young ones, that every family has struggles, but every family also has stories worth telling. The question is not whether your story is perfect, but whether you have the courage to own it and let it shape you into someone authentic and strong. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of truth and authenticity, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe for more Nigerian folktales that speak to the heart of who we are as people. Your story matters, and so does your truth.